Delhi, the seat of power of modern India. Standing firm and magnanimous on this very Raisina hill. An amalgam or the melting pot of a diverse, complex and a composite country. From the seat of power to the streets of business. A river flowing across its width and margins to the infrastructure ferrying and carrying the lives of its nearly 1 crore 70 lakh residents. Delhi has seen rapid modernization in the last 7 decades after independence. But in the core of her heart lies still the stories of her birth. The kingdom she nurtured, her rulers, their magnificence, the stories of courtesans and iconic women and men whose lasting legacy has left an indelible imprint on Delhi. Predating several kingdoms and civilizations, the first remains of humanity in a civilized form could be traced back to 3000 years ago. Harappan remains in the form of pottery and dishwares found in Mandoli, Thorgarh, Kharkhari Naher and Nacholi provides us the testament of life and a civilization in historic Delhi. We of course don't know how the life was and what the people who lived in that era spoke or if there was any ruler of the city. But the story begins to shape in a narrative and gets little clear as we march nearly 1600 years ahead.
This historic iron pillar in Mehrauli, which bears an inscription in Brahmi, one of the oldest scripts in India, gives a glimpse of Delhi's first tryst with the kingdom and its supremacy.
Dated to 4th century AD, this iconic pillar bears the inscription written in a later form of Brahmi script of Ashokan times. The inscriptions gives us no date or even genealogy of the ruler, but it talks about the victory of a great king, defeating his enemies from the expanse of areas between what is now Bengal to Punjab. Historians have agreed to identify it with Chandragupta II, the influential Gupta-era emperor who ruled a large part of Indian subcontinent in the 4th century AD. Few centuries later, folklore and bardic tales give us an account of how a king of Tomar clan named Anangpal Tomar gave this land a name based on this pillar.
So in one of the folklores, King Anangpal Tomar was told by a sage that this pillar is immovable and resting on the head of a serpent king, Vasuki. Out of sheer curiosity, he decided to check the ground beneath the pillar. Surprisingly, he indeed saw the pillar was resting on the head of a serpent king. Surprised by what he has seen, the king of several subjects asked the pillar to be reinstalled. And here comes a twist. That, according to folklore, laid genesis of Delhi's first name, Delhi.
The iron pillar is a Gupta era pillar, which means that it has been around since the 4th century CE, and it has an inscription which talks about the great victories and battles of Chandragupta II, the Gupta emperor. But its connection with Delhi is an inscription which dates from the middle of the 11th century.
Okay.
And what that inscription says, historians have actually read it a little differently. People don't agree. So one reading is that Anangpal established the city of Delhi in 1052 AD, CE, right? 1052 CE. Anangpal. This is the Tomar ruler.
Right.
Another reading of that same inscription says that Anangpal tightened the nail. Behind that also lies a story. These were a lot of temples in this area at that point. It is believed that one of Anangpal's great ministers, who was Nattal Sahu, he was a Jain Sahukar. He had built one massive temple over here. So this was an important place, and this pillar must have been incorporated in this complex. Anangpal, he was told by a sage that in his kingdom there was a nail, and this is supposed to be the nail, that this nail was driven into the ground, and it was resting on the hood of Vasuki, the serpent who holds up the earth. So this king decides that he will dig up the nail and see whether this is true or not, and he digs it up and he sees that there's blood at the end of this thing. And the story then ends saying, and he gets scared and he says, put the nail back in the thing, because he had also been told that only as long as the nail remained, his rule or his his family's rule, his dynasty's rule would continue only as long as the nail remained in the ground. So he tries to put it back, and of course it's not successful in putting it back in the head of the snake, and it says that Kili to dhili bahi, Tomar bhaya mathin. So Kili dhili rahi. So the nail remains loose, and Tomar loses his kingdom.
In other accounts, Sage Vyas told the king that as long as the pillar stood firm, his reign will last. As Tomar tried to reinstall it back, only a length measuring 19 fingernails could go in the ground. 19 generations later, Tomar rule ended as Chauhans took over this part of land, and very soon the Mamluk Turks invaded and set their kingdom. Large parts of North and West India had been ruled by several Rajput clans. Among them, one Pratihara clan established themselves as a major political force in northern India. It is said that among the generals and later governors of Pratihara kings were one from the Rajput clan Tomar, also known as Tuars. They ruled Delhi as independent kings covering present-day Haryana and parts of southwestern Uttar Pradesh. One Bilandeo or Anangpal Tomar ruled Delhi around 7th century AD, following which many of his clansmen continued to hold sway over Delhi before being displaced by another Rajput clan, Chauhans. Writing in the 14th century, legendary Amir Khusro described the reign of Anangpal Tomar, the first king of Delhi, who ruled this land around 7th century AD.
In front of his palace, the king had installed 2 stone lions and next to them a bell. Any subject seeking justice was supposed to ring the bell, and the justice was swiftly done. One day, a bird came and sat over the bell, and it rang. Coming to know that a bird has knocked the bell for justice, King Anangpal Tomar ordered that chunks of meat be placed between the teeth of stone lions so that the birds could feast.
That was one of the glimpses of Anangpal Tomar's Delhi. No one slept hungry in the city. Tomar built his capital, which largely now lies in the southern part of the city and its outskirts.
Nestled between the modern buildings of fast-growing Faridabad near Delhi lies Anangpur village, where one could still find remains, or rather faint remains, of Anangpal Tomar's reign in Delhi.
The village now wears a modern outfit. Once a mode of transport, bullock carts has now morphed into cars and SUVs. Shops, business, markets and fancy homes have now come up along this metal road. But the remains of Tomar era are still not distant. Water masonries and dams like this are among the few remnants of Tomar rule in this part of the country. Running 50 meters long and standing 7 meters high, This dam was more of a water harvesting structure meant to store rainwater during the monsoon season.
Given its topography, water or its scarcity played an important role in Delhi, in the settlements, in the villages, and the movement of its people from one place to the other in the search of water. These stepstone embankments at Surajkund, that happens to be among the significant remains of Tomar era here, were among the first water reservoirs of Delhi.
Carved stones with a wide storage facility, these were the first organized waterworks of Delhi region. The rulers were excellent planners. The tales also speak of once a magnificent sun temple here.
Water has been the ultimate town planner of the city. If you see all cities of Delhi, starting from Lal Kot, they've come up in this triangle between Yamuna on one side, running from north to south, and Aravallis on the south, and Aravallis on the western side as well. So you had numerous streams which were running down the Aravallis from the west and draining down the Yamuna. And all these cities and the rulers, they somehow realized that they had to respect this hydrology of the plains of Delhi and establish their capital cities around these streams. A common thread between the Tomars and even the later the Muslim rulers who came is that none of these kingdoms are actually directly dependent upon Yamuna for water. They saw the importance of terrain where Delhi was situated, and they made their water bodies according to the depressions that they saw and the streams which were flowing down the Aravallis. So they never tried to conquer the hydrology which we would see much later during the colonial times. They made use of the streams, designed their capital cities, the citadel and the cities around these streams and the depressions that they saw. And so you have a lot of, you still have remnants of, let's say, the Surajkund or a lot of Baulis, the Gandhak ki Bauli, the Rajon ki Baein in this area.
Few hundred years later, another Tomar king, incidentally also named Anangpal, built a fort running across today's Mehrauli to Malvinagar, Lal Kot.
These are the remains of the fortification built by Anangpal Tomar, who called it Lal Kot, running 4 km long in the circular form. These were the fortifications to keep the invaders away. Invasions did happen eventually. These walls were witness to these invasions. When Chauhans took over from Tomar dynasty, this fortification was enlarged. A part of that can still be seen at Kila Rai Pithoda.
For good many years, the fortification preserved Tomar rule, where the settlement flourished and the king went on to rule the then kingdom of Haryana from this very outpost.
Let's say the first Red Fort or the first Lal Killa, what we know as the Lal Kot, is established by Anangpal Tomar. The Tomars ruled for another 100 years, and then in the middle of the 12th century, Vigrah Raj, who is also known as Visal Dev, he defeats the Tomars, and Chauhans establish their supremacy over this region. But they soon enter into a matrimonial alliance with Tomars, and Delhi, the kingdom of Delhi, is given to Visal Dev's grandson Rai Pithoda, who we better known as Prithviraj Chauhan. So Prithviraj Chauhan uses Lal Kot as a citadel, but at the same time he also expands the ramparts and adds gates to it. According to some historians, Lal Kot at its height was around 3.5 kilometers in circumference. It would have had a population of around 5,000 or 6,000. So with this addition, there is almost a fourfold increase in the size of the city in terms of its area. And as I said, there are numerous gates, but again, how many gates are there? It's debatable. Taimur, who came in the 14th century, he observed that there were 13 gates. Amir Khusro writes about the city having 10 gates.
Anangpal Tomar II extended his kingdom, building Baldabgarh, now a city in Faridabad, and Anangtal near Mehrauli. It was the middle of 12th century when another Rajput clan, Chauhans, marched towards Delhi. Ruling the parts of northwest India from the capital Ajmer, or Ajmeru as it was called then, King Vigraharaja IV or Visaldev captured Delhi from Tomars. The Tomars continued to hold their rule, but only as subordinates to Chauhans. A king in subordination usually doesn't last long. The curtains were slowly going down on the Tomar rule in Delhi. The sun was setting on a near 400-year-old kingdom, the first state kingdom of Delhi. But over the horizon lay the rise of Prithviraj Chauhan III, the celebrated Rajput prince of ballad and romantic folklore, also known Rai Pithora. He was the warrior of four, taking battle from Chandelas to Chalukyas. Even Muhammad Ghori for once bit the dust facing him.
The Tomars in the middle of the 12th century were replaced by the Chauhans.
Okay.
Like the Tomar, the Chauhans were also a Rajput clan who had come to rule from Ajmer.
Right.
And they had, Vigraharaj was the is the ruler, also known as Visaldev.
Right.
He was the one who conquered Delhi from the Tomars.
Okay.
And he established his rule here. Capital was still Ajmer. And then it was one of his successors, Prithviraj III, who is really known as, is known as Rai Pithora.
Rai Pithora.
By that name also. He extended this fort. By that time, towards the end of the 12th century, the Chauhans were finding that the Turks were posing a threat on their western frontier. So they had started to consolidate and strengthen their forts.
In the year 1180, he enlarged the fortified area of Lalkot, the remnant of Tomar era, and called it Kila Rai Pithora, whose remains could still be seen today near Malvinagar. Now a hangout for morning walkers, general public, bird watchers and leisure seekers, the fort once stood tall and mighty.
These are the only remains of Kila Rai Pithora's majestic walls and ramparts, which in splendor and glory stood as high as 18 meters high and several feet thick. These days, residential colonies and busy markets have sprung up near this vast complex which once was.
For its rulers, Delhi was an important frontier, a frontier with its economic importance and also a strategic junction to keep the raiders away from Chauhan's capital, Ajmer.
Delhi has always had a strategic importance because Delhi actually sits between, it's the narrowing of the Ganga Yamuna Doab at this point, where on one side you have the Himalaya, on the other side you have the desert, the Thar desert.
Right.
So any invasion that happens, any invader who comes into Delhi comes through that narrow neck of land. So, these guys are further south in Ajmer, but he has to stop the invaders there at Delhi. So therefore, particularly as the threat of invasion increased, this role of Delhi as a frontier town
Became a frontier.
became a very important factor to strengthen this place, even though it was not the capital.
In the year 1191, Chauhan defeated Sultan Muhammad Ghori, the fierce raider of Ghurid region, which comprised present-day Afghanistan, who had overthrown the mighty empire of Ghaznavi in the year 1186. Ghori's army retreated and he was captured. One of the most belligerent of raiders was defeated, wreaking shock and disbelief in his camp.
So the first battle of Tarain takes place in 1191 AD. The two armies, the army of Muhammad Ghori and Prithviraj Chauhan, they meet at Thanesar, which is around 150 kilometers from Delhi. Muhammad Ghori obviously wants to invade India and wants to establish his kingdom in Delhi. And the Chauhans respond very well. Gauri is defeated conclusively, but he's allowed to go back to Gauri, to Afghanistan. The Chauhans are content just to take back the fortress of Bhatinda, which Muhammad Gauri on his as part of his advance towards India had taken from them. So they are happy to get back the fortress of Bhatinda, and they come back to Delhi.
But according to one chronicle, Prithviraj Chauhan decided to release Gauri, overruling the advice of his own men. A year later, in the Second Battle of Tarain, a regrouped Muhammad Gauri with a vast force of men defeated Chauhan.
Actually, the Turks were slowly making incursions, they were trying to expand. And the reason was very simple. They ruled over, Gauri and his brother, in fact. They ruled over, parts of Afghanistan, certainly nowhere near as rich, as the Ganga Jamuna Doab would be. It was the, the fact that it produced so many crops. It was a very rich agricultural land. That's what always tempted, people to come and try and establish themselves here.
According to the legend of Al-Minaj bin Siraj, the battle went on for days, where Gauri commanded an army of over 1,20,000 men and several thousand horses and mounted archers. It was a usual practice among the chroniclers to inflate the scale of grandeur, be it size of the army or the number of people taken hostage, the valuation of loot, and even number of people kings and rulers commanded. The chroniclers were, after all, men of court, deputed to write what sounded grand and mighty.
So in 1192 AD, Muhammad Gauri is back for the same purpose. This time he is better prepared, both in terms of men and his strategy as well. There are sources, historical sources, which talk about the numbers in the two armies. They put the Chauhan army at around 3,20,000 and the Ghurad army at 1 lakh or 1,20,000. But then a lot of historians dispute these numbers, and they say both the armies were much less in number. But the Chauhan army definitely was larger than the Ghurad army.
The battle marked the end of Chauhan dynasty and in effect the Rajput rule in Delhi. According to bin Siraj's account, Chauhan dismounted from his elephant and fled on a horse, only to be captured by Gauri's men and executed near Sursuti.
So an interesting fact which crops up after the battle is what happens to Prithviraj Chauhan. The most straightforward conclusion is that he is killed in the battle. Then there are some other sources which say that he escapes the battlefield but is captured by the Ghurids, taken back to Ajmer, not Delhi, where he is allowed to rule as a vassal for some years, but later executed for treason. There is a third version which comes from the bardic tradition of Prithviraj Raso. Prithviraj Raso is an epic poem written by Chand Bardai, who was one of his closest friends as well as the court poet.
In other accounts, some 100 years later, written by Abul Fazl, one of the principal advisors of great Mughal Emperor Akbar, Prithviraj Chauhan was captured, imprisoned, blinded and taken to Afghanistan. There his devoted bard Chand Bardai tricked the Sultan to see the Rajput king's archery skills even without vision. Sultan agreed, and using his great skills, Chauhan fired at Sultan, severely injuring him. After that, both Chauhan and Bardai were killed by Sultan's guards.
In Prithviraj Raso, there is a huge public demonstration of the skill of Rai Pithoda, and just as he is about to shoot the target, Chand Bardai utters this couplet which gives away the location of Muhammad Gauri. He says, 8 बांस 24 गज अंगुल अष्ट प्रमाण ता ऊपर सुल्तान है मत चूको चौहान. So Prithviraj Chauhan, after listening to this couplet, he accurately shoots in the direction of Muhammad Ghori and he is killed.
Back in Ajmer, the power play had just begun. Ghori returned to Ghazni, appointing Chauhan's son Govind Raj to the throne, who though was a ruler, but for all practical purposes owed allegiance to Sultan.